Hello, beloveds, friends, folks that I haven't met yet. My name is Merrick Syzygy, and I am really pleased to share with you today about Djerdjevdan. And if you're not familiar, Djerdjevdan is a holiday that is, well, St. George's Day is what Djerdjevdan means. Djero is the way that George is, how we use the name George in the Balkans commonly. Djero, Djerdjevdan is St. George's Day. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about that's how you would spell Djerdjevdan in Romanized Serbo-Croatian. And it's a holiday that takes place all over the Balkans and all over Europe, honestly. St. George's Day is a holiday that is commonly practiced all over Western, Northern, and Eastern and Southern Europe, and places beyond there, including the United States, especially for folks who are in diaspora from the Balkans. And so it's really a pleasure to talk about something that I didn't really experience in the waspy sundown town that I grew up in, but I did get to experience in my Balkan community, my Balkan church community growing up, as well as my extended family who is in Balkan diaspora as well. And I have had the opportunity to see little, memory photos pop up, including for today. And it was such a pleasure that I got to see a picture from my Bubby and Jetta's house when I was, oh my gosh, maybe 5 years old. And my Bubby had set out the traditional nature aligned practice for kids in particular, where you have a basin full of water with an egg in the bottom and fresh flowers that have been picked the day before. A lot of times there's nettle leaves in there as well, which are native to the region. And so, folks will bathe themselves in the flower essences. And this practice, it goes back long before the Christianization of the Balkans. It goes back to our pre-colonial practices. And in the Balkans, earth worshiping, nature worshiping were absolutely a significant part of our daily lives. And it's something that, in many ways, our practices were adopted by the church, as Christianity has a tendency of doing. It will, say, oh, we're going to take this existing practice within a culture. And as we are Christianizing the region, we'll say, oh, well, that's actually this narrative and superimpose itself on something. And so the religious activities that are associated with the Eastern Orthodox Church, especially in Serbian Eastern Orthodox practices, are a recall to our practices from pre-Christian times, and something that hold a lot of weight, therefore, because it's not just something that we started doing. It was something that the priest said, hey, if you want people to get on board, you're going to have to accommodate these practices. And in the Balkans, we've held on to a lot of our pre-Christianization, pre-colonial practices, which is really lovely. I'll talk more about those as we move through those various holidays and the ways that, the Badnjak is now the Christmas tree that folks are so familiar with, things of that nature. But for the moment, we'll go to the St. George, the Dragon Slayer. And I want to, as we're getting into that conversation, first talk about the importance of a concept called Slava. Slava is a practice in the Balkans, especially in Eastern Orthodox Christianity and in the Serbian Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It's incredibly common to have one of two Slavas. Now, your Slava is associated with a patron saint, and the patron saint is the saints whose day is closest to whatever day in the liturgical calendar that your family converted to Christianity. That becomes your saint's day. And in a tradition that builds on the ancestral veneration practice that is pre-colonial in the Balkans, we have turned Slava into an ancestral veneration and see these saints as our ancestors, our predeceased ancestors. They were real people in history with documentation for the most part, not all, but mostly. And the two most popular are Saint Sava, who brought Christianity to Serbia, and Saint George the Dragon Slayer, who may actually be a superimposition of that figure on another actual historical figure who slayed the dragon in terms of actual acts. But Saint George's name became associated with the dragon slaying lore. And May 6th is the Slava for Saint George and for people whose family patron saint is Saint George. And because my family converted to, my patrilineal family converted many, 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 many generations ago, back in the Balkans, to Orthodoxy, we did it around St. George's Day. So again, I can remember being a little kid and my bubby would have out the basin with the flowers. And there's a picture of me that I'm washing my face right next to one of my brothers in the basin. And I remember that explicit memory of it too, thinking how magical and whimsical that practice was, and not knowing the full levity of what the significance of that practice was at the time, just knowing that on St. George's Day you did this, not realizing necessarily the full implications of what Slava added to the levity of the day, or the meaningfulness of the day, and how it's also become a national holiday. St. George's Day, Djerdjevdan, has become a national holiday in the Balkans, specifically in Serbia, I can speak to, where people will go out and they'll go for a barbecue. They'll find somewhere to go out in the woods and have a meal, or in a park. It's all about getting back out into nature. There's not as much of the practice of like ritually sacrificing the first young lamb of the year, or the other practices that we would traditionally do as part of our pagan practices. And some of that is because the driving of the dragon out of the Balkans, to my understanding from my research, has a lot to do with the same context of what St. Patrick did in Ireland, where the snakes, that was a terminology to refer to pagans and druids and folks who were still practicing earth-based religions when Christianity was colonizing throughout the region. And so the way that St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland, St. George, the dragon slayer, according to some of the legends, because there's variations on the lore, the dragon was had become overly greedy and was demanding tribute from a town, in this case. And it wasn't about necessarily driving out all the dragons, but driving out this one specific dragon that had become greedy and had drained the town of all of its resources, essentially, and was now taking the lives of the innocent villagers. And so St. George comes in, tries to negotiate things, and the dragon's having none of it and ends up killing the dragon to liberate the folks in that village. So there is a very variable, obviously, there with what the lore is in terms of like driving droves of snakes out versus slaying one dragon. However, there is significance to dragon lore in the Balkans. We were not historically anti-dragon. In fact, dragons, there's two primary classifications of dragons. And I'm forgetting the exact terminology in Serbian that is used for Zmaj, and there's another flavor of dragon, if you will. And so there would be a version that was greedy and had grown to proportions that was just, it was out of balance with things going on. But there's also good dragons. And in Serbian lore, in the mythos of serpent lore in Serbia, the Illyrian people are the snake people of the sea. like we have ongoing associations with snakes, the same way that the Scarossi Celts, who were had come from Gaul into the Balkans and established the Celts there. They, the Celts came from there, but they also had originally been from our region. So like the snake worship came from the Lepenskivir region and Vincha culture and spread outwards and then came back again, is what I'm trying to say. And so, we've got these parallels of snake worship and paganism and earth-based practices happening in the Balkans and in Gaul, modern-day Ireland, Brittany, no longer Brittany, but there was good dragons, and there was the dragons who would need to be handled. But we don't talk about the positive correlations with dragons that exist in ancestral history. And it's still commonly a practice to hesitate to kill snakes in Serbia because of this, because the concept is that you have a household guardian in these snakes. The snakes protect the home, and when a snake disappears, it's an indication that probably an elder is going to pass or someone significant. They're there to protect, they're there to keep the energy really good. You would leave offerings outside for the snakes. You'd never harm them. And once they reached about 100 years old, they would turn into a dragon and they'd go off and do their thing. And hopefully they wouldn't turn into a bad dragon. Some of them did. It's kind of like the concept of how some people over-engorge themselves with wealth and become exploitative, jagoffs who go around committing crimes against humanity to acquire more wealth, like, basically all the billionaires that exist. And so, it's not that the St. George the Dragon Slayer lore is inherently problematic. It's that it lacks the nuance of the conversation around how snakes are not inherently bad and dragons are not inherently bad, and how we had a positive rapport in history with these ancestral beings. The dragons, the snakes are our ancestors. We see them as ancestors, the same way that we see St. George the Dragon Slayer as an ancestor now. To the colonization, we would see, and still do to an extent, see these beings as our anthropomorphic ancestors. And sparkle water. I haven't been having alcohol for quite a while and not really missing it. But I do love the effervescence of the bubbles. So yeah, that is just like the little bitty drops. And let me see if I can pull up here a little bit more, because there's so many layers to it as well. And I don't want to get too far into all the additional layers necessarily in terms, because, this is about the dragon healing. But there's so many aspects to this holiday that are still recognized and practiced, like going and making a wreath. In fact, today, where did I put mine? It's in here. There we are. I have a lot of green. So I went and made a wreath. We didn't have flowers in bloom today. There were no flowers that I could put into my wreath, but there were these gorgeous reeds in the water that were ready to come and were willing to be accepted. So I prayed. I put my feet up to my ankles in the river nearby, just as we continue to do. And I had sat and sung Djerdjevdan and a little bit of Verbice Verbo Zelena, which is a song about a willow tree. Willows are significant to Djerdjevdan because Djerdjevdan, St. George's Day, had historically, even before St. George, been a holiday where we observed the coming of spring. Finally, the Rolska, the river mermaids, were no longer a threat. Finally, you could milk your cows. Finally, you could be safe outside at night, because it would be light out for longer. It was the changing of the seasons brought changes in, the cycle of life in the villages as well. And so it was a celebration of those, return to practices before it was about villainizing paganism, villainizing our practices. We kolo dance, we cook meat, and plenty of vegan dishes as well. We pray, we set our intentions for abundance, for prosperity in the fields and in our bank accounts. Washing your face with the nettle and flower water and setting those intentions, and even pouring water. There's traditions where, you wanted to be the young girl in the village who got pushed into the river because that meant that, you were being chosen as the figure who was sacrificed to invite the abundance. You were being washed over with the abundance of spring. And that those nuances would change from village to village, but that was essentially the point. You would acknowledge that Perun and Veles would be having their battle coming up, where they would be dancing and honoring the oak trees of Perun, and how the lightning would be striking the dragon of Veles, which was supposed to be the overextension, the overexploitation, not over exploitation generally isn't a great idea, but really, above and beyond level of that, that Veles went to when Veles had abducted the, same way that you've got your Persephone and Hades and Zeus mythos, this predates that. And so, that also was acknowledged on St. George's Day. You would honor the coming summer storms, where Perun and Veles would be battling it out. So there's layers and layers to the mythos and the lore of Djerdjevdan. And then there's also the even more recent than Christianization relevance of Djerdjevdan, where that was the day, St. George's Day was the day where the Nazis had come en masse to villages in Serbia and Croatia in particular, and were taking our people by the trainloads along. So, if you were Orthodox, if you were Jewish, and if you were Romani, and if you were communist. So, which was basically everyone in Serbia and Croatia at that time. And would that have been, that region of former Yugoslavia. And so we were all being put onto trains on St. George's Day. And on the train, the lore goes that the Romani folks on the train were singing this heart-wrenching song about being separated from their love, and taught that to all the other Balkan folks who were on the trains with them. And that was how they comforted each other as they were rounded up to go to the concentration camps in Croatia. And so the song Djerdjevdan, which has become iconic in the Balkans, adds another layer to the day because it's honoring all the folks who were lost. And the song that has been covered over and over across the Balkans, talking about the sun is here. Let's praise God, the sun is here. It's St. George's Day, but I'm not with the one I love. And the song lyrics don't give that away in the modern version that you can see the transliteration in English. It doesn't really tell you all of that. It's something that is part of what's recognized in Serbia and Croatia when we celebrate Djerdjevdan, but it's not part of the larger conversation either. Just like the positive aspects of our dragon history and how our empowerment from our dragon lineages are what made us so fiercely capable of defending ourselves. And even though we suffered catastrophic losses over and over and over through the centuries, but especially during the Holocaust, the folks in the Balkans were by percentage the most, there was the most deaths by population density in the Balkans due to the Holocaust. in Europe in the 40s. And so that was just trying to think how to transition that thought, that basically it's, you know, even though we faced those horrible conditions, we overcame them because of that strength that's within us, because of our connection to our land, because of our spirit, and how even though the Balkans have been cross-colonized for hundreds upon hundreds, thousands of years at this point, we've not lost our connection to our land, to our practices, even if they are done in subtle, nuanced ways that are subverted in order to appear like we've, assimilated. So many of our practices, even in the Orthodox Church to this day, continue to bear witness to and hold space for our ancestral power. And so that is what I've been doing a lot of work with my dragon, E. E doesn't want their whole name shared, and I respect that. And I really appreciate that my dragon wanted to be a part of this. Because I was really not sure about, like, really, I'm going to go up and just start talking about, like, dragon healing. You know, there's a lot of levels to this that I'm going to have to unpack first. And he's like, yep. And you're going to do that. You're going to talk for 20 minutes about all the levels of Djerdjevdan and talking about dragon lore and bringing up the fact that there are nuances to, you know, the paradoxes, and that it's not just all bad dragons the way that Western culture has demonized dragons through most of Western cultures. And so I'm really, really grateful that, for one, E has wanted to connect with me, and we've had a really powerful time connecting over the past more than year that we've been, you know, going by first name basis. We're connected on a daily basis, doing work together, unpacking the ancestral wounds and the work around that's required of us when we come from wounded dragon lineages. And there's many, many cultures that have had a positive rapport with dragons over history that's been erased or whitewashed or assimilated or appropriated. And so it's really important that we recognize and bear witness to, you know, yes, dragons are incredibly powerful, but there's a relationship there, much in the way that the old gods would die off in many belief systems because there was no one left to believe in them anymore. You know, there is that rapport with our dragons that we can nourish and be in our Slava practice, in our ancestral veneration in that way, knowing that these dragons are the elders of snakes who are our household protectors. And some of them go bad, but by and large, that does not mean that all dragons are bad. So part of this is just to give those insights and reframes around who dragons have been mythologically. And I want to bring up, let's see here. I have some tabs open and I kind of want to narrow it down. I think I want to start with this one. The wildwitcherbs.com is a Balkan page that I've really been enjoying, and found that their resources have all been easy to vet across various, you know, what have you. So let me share screen. Cool, it's giving me tips. I don't need to share audio right now. Thank you so much for the offer, though. Here we go. All right, so looking here, house snakes and ancestor spirits, Balkan home guardians. I'll just do a little read along because I actually really appreciate that's something that I've seen on Twitch when Heaven, I don't know who's familiar with Heaven, And I'll tag their Twitch, or I'll link their Twitch in the comments and or caption. But they, kind of read through things. And I've also seen Siobhan do this, the birth doula. So let's go through here, or the birth realm doula. Yeah, there was a time when every house was believed to have a guardian, not an angel, not a saint, a snake, which I just love. And not just in Serbia, across the Balkans, Croatia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Romania, and northern Greece, folk beliefs held that a snake lived with the household, not against us. It would live, under the house or alongside it, if there was rocks or whatever. So not in the house, but in its natural environment around the house. And Zmaj, Kuchna Zmija, Domovnik, Spiridus, all the different names that you might come across from different parts of the Balkans. It was not an ordinary animal in the sense, an animal in the ordinary sense. It was bound to the house and the land beneath it and the people who slept above it. Bonded to the family, which is why when I mentioned, there'd be, if someone were to pass, and that's actually discussed in this article, that it would be kind of like, oh, that's a sign. Something significant is about to happen. And so there was multiple house spirits, but the snake was, because we had been, worshiping snakes for hundreds and thousands of years, all the way back to, I believe there's, evidence in Lepenski from the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods, but for sure in Vinča culture, there was evidence of snake worship. And there's a lot more evidence of that because it was much more recent, in 5000 BC-ish versus 10,000 BC. Excuse me. And so ethnographic records described that villagers would be leaving offerings, and the house snake was believed to guard the home from illness and misfortune, protect our livestock and our stored food, warn of death, fire, or betrayal, and ensure the continuity of the family line, literally our ancestors and our protectors. Their appearance was never random. Their appearance was a sign that mattered. And it didn't believe in isolation, this belief. Ancestors did not fully leave. They remained tied to the house, the hearth, the land, and the bloodline. Now, we did believe that the spirit could travel in the rivers and such, and the snakes were related to that belief system as well. But the snake was understood to be an ancestral spirit of our embodied dead and or a guardian placed by the ancestors themselves, depending on the village and specific regional beliefs. But sometimes it was believed to be the first ancestor of the household or soul that returned to guard what it built, which I believe is the case with St. George the Dragon Slayer. And it feels very resonant. Like he gives the verification, the validation that yes, this is resonant. This is an affirmation. So it was chthonic logic, not symbolism, and not metaphoric. Snakes lived in the earth, ancestors lived beneath it. And this was our actual thought process. It, you can see the correlation with how back in Lepenski Vir, which is on the border of Serbia and Romania, we would have buried our ancestors under the floorboards in that ritual center. And there's tons of archaeological evidence of this. So snakes emerge from the places where the dead were believed to be living. And so this is why they show up in our lore over and over again. And a snake would be seen leaving when the death of the head of the household would happen, which would be a collapse of the family line, although that could also be, say the eldest son dies in war kind of thing, and you haven't found out yet, that kind of thing. Or the house is about to burn or be, everyone's about to move. They would be leaving the snake behind. The snake would literally leave the house because, like, you're not there. We're our relationship to the house is being dissected in that way. And now Perun is, the oak is sacred to Perun historically. And so that ties into Perun and Veles as well, which I mentioned earlier. But we still, Zapis, the sacred oak, is still a part of our practices. The Badnjak burning, which is now in Western culture a Christmas tree, was originally a Badnjak log, a part of a young branch off of an oak tree, or a young oak tree itself would be given as a sacrifice over the course of the winter solstice. And so that was something that continues to practice this day. Like, I've been to a Badnjak burning in my lifetime as an adult. And it's something that it happens all the time back in Serbia. I got to have that experience when I was living in Pittsburgh, PA, because there's a significant Balkan population over there. And so yeah, those beliefs didn't die off. They just got mixed in with the Eastern Orthodox practices. And that's very common. I mean, even the root work that we do, that our magicians tend to work with the village priests to collaborate to this day back in the old country, and to an extent here in Turtle Island, United States as well. United States, Turtle Island. But yeah, snakes, and for that reason, snakes were tolerated, but they didn't get named. They were explained away as God's creatures, but quietly protected, even by devout Christians. And I just want to see if we can, is there a way to do a pause on here? It doesn't seem that there is, which is unfortunate. I thought that that was a feature on here, but that's okay. Also, it looks like, oh good, that went back. So yeah, we can continue to look at this. Oops, not you, silly. Boop, 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 boop. So yeah, it explained so many things: why homes would feel different after death, why land would feel hostile or welcoming, why some houses prospered or failed. The snakes were part of that belief system. And some of it was, you know, self-fulfilling prophecy, but a lot of it was simply ancestral practices, ancestral wisdom, playing itself out through generations. And people really believe in house snakes anymore, but they don't like to kill them. They still leave offerings, and they still share the stories, often as warnings rather than beliefs. But we're trying to shift that. And that's how our old religions might die. And I will link this article so that you can go into some of these other articles listed here about the significance of how, Nemusti Jesik, where the shepherd gains the ability to hear animal speech, things like that. You can check out more of this. But yeah, it says that the snake was never worshipped. It was acknowledged. There's indications that snakes were worshipped, and we'll go into that, later. But I really wanted to take the opportunity to dive into this lore, and we'll do a little bitty ritual here in just a moment to kind of, transition through this period. But just real quick, the frequently asked questions that, what was the house snake? A domestic guardian. Were they real or spiritual? Both. Did people leave offerings? Yes. What did house snakes protect? Homes from illness, fire, misfortune, livestock and food stores, and the survival of the family line. House snakes are not unique to the Balkans, but was definitely preserved strongly in the Balkans. And yeah, this is basically what we just talked about. So coming back to our main page here, we're just going to take a moment. If you want to get a drink, go ahead and do that. I'm going to set this here for a moment and grab my candle so that we can do this next part. Okay. Now, you may or may not have personally connected with your dragon. It's okay if you haven't connected with your dragon yet. You do not need to have done that for this to still be a significant and meaningful practice. And you can always come back to this replay at some point in the future when you have made that connection so that you can revisit this practice. So first, we're going to set the space and just bring in the intention. If you're sitting, if you want to sit as upright as you can find your posture, and either fold your feet or somehow set so that your root of your tailbone or your feet, either or both, are grounded. And if you're laying down, then you could just imagine your tailbone, your root, and go ahead and root yourself into the earth ever so slightly, asking for the earth's protection to bring up a field of light around you. I like iridescent, full of all of the colors. And let that bubble envelop you, creating a protective barrier. And go ahead and within your protected space, light your candle. And go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and sit personally. And if you want to bring in some stillness, that might help. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the fan for a moment. The screen's a little further away, and this way it'll be easier for you to hear me. So go ahead and find a steady breath. Find a steadiness within. And anchor into your presence, knowing that you are protected. Anchor into your intention, or bring it to mind so you can anchor in. For me, I'm bringing the intention that E and I can experience another moment of intentional activation and healing together so we can continue to do our work here and henceforth. And asking E to come lean into the space. E's already been here, but to lean in more deeply. And taking this moment for giving you the opportunity to invite in your dragon or dragons. And if you don't know their names, that's fine. You can just put this as an invitation that that you are extending your hand, that you want to build that relationship. And so take a moment to go ahead and open your heart space front to back. That's where your own wings are, right between your shoulder blades. And just sitting in that presence. You don't have to be actively doing anything just yet. Just being in the presence and company, or holding the space for that company to unfold and be. If there's anything in particular that you feel called to say to your dragon, by all means, go ahead and say that. And also, if you haven't already, maybe keeping in a thought for where you might have somewhere that you can make any notes for any messages that you receive from your dragon or dragons that are meant to be heard right now. And bringing in that wisdom. If you aren't hearing it in your mind or your ears, you could be hearing it in your heart, even if your mind's ear and mind's eye have not yet interpreted it yet. And that's part of opening up to receive these messages, is that even if they don't consciously, coherently, cognizantly make logical sense yet, sometimes our initiations and activations need to be seeds planted and watered. We're still planting seeds. It's still spring. Something that you plant today might open up and you meet your dragon on summer solstice when the fires are burning at their hottest and your dragon feels full of life and aliveness, So you can allow yourself to be okay with however your ritual goes today, however it unfolds. Whether you get lots of messages and you're ignoring what I'm saying right now, which go you, anchor in, hyper focus, flow state, baby, get in there. But if you're still hearing me and you're not yet tapped in, just allowing whatever's coming through. Maybe you want to go ahead and do some automatic writing. Maybe you want to make some marks on a page. Maybe you want to move your body and channel whatever movements your dragon needs you to make space within for the magic, for the relationship, for the responsibility that comes with having a dragon relationship. I talk to my every day. Every day. I ask for protection. I ask what my needs. I take selfies when I see my in the corner of my eye. I write poems for my dragon when they come up. I make offerings for the snakes that are going to become dragons someday. I dance and sing dragon songs. to be in ceremony with them. I wear my dragon pendant, which I'm hold it in here. I learn about dragons and snakes and do research to be a better ancestor, to be a better knowledge bearer and wisdom sharer. And I work to dismantle slander against dragons and snakes. There's so many ways that we can be in communion and in community with our dragons that aren't necessarily sitting and meditating on dragons. Although that is a beautiful, powerful way to connect and was instrumental in helping me early on to build that connection with my dragon. And I do have more than one, but E is the one who's at the forefront. E is the one who's leading the charge, and E is the only one who's given me a name so far. And I respect that. Just like I also have vulnerability and visibility things where to preserve my essence, to protect myself, to, gauge a situation first, or because I've been given an indication that something's out of alignment for whatever reason. Okay, so, that's part of not rushing your dragon into a relationship will definitely go a long way. Having your own confidence is important, but not having an asshole ego about it. And that is something really beautiful that E and I have been able to do. Is E has helped me come to terms with my strength and power and my voice, the fire of my voice, in such profound ways. And at first it was a little bit overwhelming. It required constant work together and me literally speaking out loud, fighting my demons, not my dragon, but my demons, with my dragon at my back, letting that fire come up, knowing that not all dragons are bad, not all fiery words filled with power are bad. Sometimes they are the words of justice and truth, speaking new, more healed realities into existence rather than just violence for the sake of violence or violence for the sake of oppression. Dragons can really help us learn the nuances between those similar but not identical energies. And so there's a lot of ways that we can heal with our dragons in these rituals, in these moments like this, where we're letting them come through and inspire what needs to be said or what needs to be done or felt. The same way that any well and wise ancestor should and could be invited in to help you learn how to access the wholeness of yourself, of your reality, of your experience, of your embodiments. There is power in that fire. There's strength in that fire. Not all fire is bad. And as someone who comes from a people who revered fire forever, literally, worshipped fire, it's about the relationship you have with it. It's about the relationship you have with your dragons, with the fire, with your voice, with the violence. Is the violence for the sake of oppression, or is the violence for the sake of emancipation to end cycles of worse violence? There's so many nuances that we have had erased culturally in so many contexts through the course of colonization around the world, that have stolen our fire and our voices and made performances of niceties, made them socially more valuable than the power of truth and honesty. And there's a lot of things I could get into in terms of how and why I think that's happened. And I would love to get into that in a future conversation. But for right now, I want to take these next 5 minutes to 10 minutes to close up our circle with a song. And then we can close the circle and transition on to the rest of our day. Now, there's two songs. I think I'm going to do both. Neither one is specifically about dragons, but both about Djerdjevdan. And he's telling me that's sufficient because a lot of the dragon music has been erased from the archives in the non-astral sense. So I'm going to have to do more research to be able to access that. And probably it's going to be something that I learn when I go back to Serbia, Croatia, Romania, and, learn in my homelands that I've never been to yet in this lifetime. So let's pull up Djerdjevdan lyrics. Here we go. And let me just all right. Let me go ahead and pull that screen up now that I've got it prepared. Here we go. And here's hoping we don't have to deal with any more commercials. I got the lyrics. All right, I think that shared appropriately, but I'm not sure 100%. If it didn't, then you just saw me singing. So, there we go. But let me pull up the lyrics for that in English. Djerdjevdan lyrics, English translation. So you can see that. All right. Spring is landing on my shoulder, green lily of the valley, to everyone except me. Roads are drawn, but I'm on the same place. There's no star Danica. There is no star Danica, my fellow traveler, presumably to someone else on the train, because they left their love behind. Hey, to who is my dear, smelling on the lily of the valley, smelling the lily of the valley, to me never again. Hey, here comes the dawn, here comes the dawn, to pray to God. Here comes the dawn, and it's St. George's Day, and I'm not with the one I love. Let her name be mentioned on every other day except St. George's Day. And it's kind of hard to imagine the pain of being ripped away from your loved ones to be sent to a concentration camp. And I didn't know the lyrics when I was a kid, but this is a song that every single gathering where we golo danced, Djerdjevdan was performed by Svirai, the band that was there. And yeah, I didn't know the lyrics, but I could feel I didn't know the English translation, even though I know some Serbian and Old Church Slavonic from the time I was little. I'm not fluent, and I didn't know as a kid what the words meant. I just knew that all the adults would be swaying and singing, and I would be singing along, not knowing what the words meant. And a couple years ago, I finally found the song again and the translation and everything, and it broke my heart. So it is a heavy reality of, the wounds that we've carried, but the strength that we carry also, thanks to our dragon ancestry. And we are at the hour mark here in a moment, but I do want to play a little bit more upbeat of a song. E is saying, yes, let's bring this on a slightly, more upbeat. So verbice, verbo zelena. Let's see here. I haven't seen this performance of Verbice Verbo Zelena before. Do they sing or not? Because they don't. Oh, okay, yeah, and they're going to do the polyphonic. Wonderful. So we'll just play through this. Boop. Okay, we can take off that. And Let me see. Verb, beat, say. Okay, there we go. And this is a song about a green willow tree. Again, willows are sacred for St. George's Day in Peru. This song literally refers to St. George's Day again. So let's go ahead and pull this up, and then we will shift in. And I'm going to switch the screen that I'm sharing real quick so that I can show you the lyrics really quick before we wind in and transition. So, verbice verbo zelena, Djerdjevdanova, šosi se rano razvila. Little willow, green willow, on St. George's Day, why have you flowered early? Actually, this is super relevant. A lot of our trees flowered early, and then the frost killed off a lot of stuff from the early. Yeah, because it wasn't done frosting yet either. Yeah, why did you flower early on St. George's Day? Didn't you have any worries? I had a shepherd boy. I waited for him till midnight. From midnight on, I slept. Why did you flower early? Didn't you have any worries? And in one version, it's, didn't your mother teach you differently? And so some of this is lost in translation in terms of like cultural nuances. But it's about staying up for your lover under the green willow, and the hope and the disappointment, but there's still it's not that the hope is lost. It's just like there is some of that in quite a few Balkan songs where there's in like Western pop music, it's not always happy endings, and any other number of genres of music. And it's not inherently bad. It's just a little bit, like ambivalent. There's not necessarily a super positive ending or a super negative ending. It's an ending. Willow tree, why did you bloom early? Also, why did my dude not show up? And that also, even though that song predates Djerdjevdan, the Romani song, as far as I'm aware, there's a lot of parallels there as well. And so what E wants me to bring in is that is part of that resilience of, not giving up hope. So your lover didn't show up that night. So you got carted off to a concentration camp. So your people have been colonized infinite number of times. And yet we continue on. And yet we continue to find our power and our truth and our voice and lean into our ancestral strength. My surname, my legal surname that I don't use generally, except for legal purposes, means son of 100 men strong. My name is built with strength, and it's something that my ancestry has saved my butt so many times, protected me, informed me, redirected me, supported me in ways that I didn't always realize in the moment. And those ancestors include my dragon and other animal familiars that have been a significant part of my life, whether I knew the correlation between my ancestry or not. Because while I'm really, really blessed and privileged to have been immersed in much more lore than a lot of people in diaspora, including like even some of my cousins who have almost no connection to our culture whatsoever. And so I recognize that I'm blessed, even though there are still gaps that I'm finding answers in. But that is part of my work as a living ancestor and an elder in training, is that I continue to learn these stories and share them so that we can continue to have conversations to remember what it is our ancestors have been trying to share and tell us, so that we can unpack the narratives that have been forced on us by colonization and return to the strength of that ancestral wisdom that we were cut off from in so many cultures by Western colonization in so many forms. And yeah, when we do that healing work, it is part of our decolonization work. It is part of our shadow work. It is part of our liberation work to be in ancestral communion with intention, with discernment and care, to learn our histories and share them with each other so that we can remember our power. That all feels a little bit circular, but you just felt like it really needed to be landed. Sometimes things need to be said more than one way so they can really land. And we're coming to the hour and 10-minute mark here. So let's go ahead and maybe we'll be wrapped up at 1:11 exactly. Wouldn't that be nifty? That'd be so cool. So whatever messages you may have received from your dragon, in art, in movement, in words, in songs, in signs, in messages of any sort, continue to write them down, continue to build that relationship. And for now, saying thank you. Thank you, E. Thank you to all the dragons that came to be present here. I can feel that it's not just E present here in this moment, and it's not even just my dragon. So I want to say thank you for the wisdom that you're imparting, for being an ancestor and protecting us, for guiding, for empowering, and for simply being. Thank you, E. Thank you to our dragons. Thank you to our ancestors who help us build these relationships from across the veil, even when we've been in diaspora. So, sending love into your roots that are in the earth, so that you can withdraw them back up into your body, sending that love into the earth and that gratitude for holding us through this practice. Feeling that wisdom, that love filling your bubble, that strength, feeling that bubble of protection, continuing to be protected even as we leave this space. And I reclaim all of my energy back to me that belongs to me, and I return all of your energy back to any of you that belongs to you with love, with divine support. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing in this everything for, and if you want to get in touch with me, you know where the links are. And if you want to show your support, here's where you can do so. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to our next ritual and our next conversation. Stay blessed.